Hi, I'm Nick Gyles, Chief Product Officer at Daizy. Daizy is a platform for enterprises to design, deploy and manage IoT projects. We work with a number of enterprise customers on projects at scale. So what I wanted to do in this session is just spend some time talking about some of the challenges that organizations face as they look to scale up their IoT deployments and some of the ways that those challenges can be addressed. Low power WAN technologies allow enterprises really for the first time to deploy really high volumes of devices in a very cost effective way. Devices themselves are low cost, the connectivity is low cost, but the challenge for an enterprise is how to keep that implementation and management cost in line with this. Otherwise you spend significantly more managing the project. Today I'd like to go through an example which is BCHA, housing association based in the UK, who have embarked on a significant IoT rollout. So why does BCHA need IoT? They are a social housing provider as well as operating care homes across southern England. They've got quite a wide geographic footprint, over 300 kilometres, and a large number of properties. And across those properties a number of use cases around compliance, health and well-being that they wanted to monitor. Really to drive operational efficiency, they're spending a lot of time visiting these properties, measuring and ensuring safety and security. They wanted to automate a lot of their compliance reporting, but also reduce that climate impact, both from travelling to these locations, but also the performance of the properties themselves. They're also looking to drive better customer relationships with their tenants, with the residents, with those that are that stakeholders that they're working with, and increasingly now with energy prices increasing, understanding where people are struggling with the cost of heating properties and providing resources for more vulnerable residents. So BCHA identified 3 use cases they wanted in the first phase of the project. The key point they made was that they wanted a common operating model so that it wasn't different systems for each of these use cases. So the first is disrepair. This is monitoring temperature and humidity in indoor environments, specifically to identify conditions for mold and damp issues. They found they were replacing a lot of bathrooms, for example, where mold issues were occurring. Also monitoring void property where maybe the heating isn't on and they want to make sure that the condition of that asset remains intact during the void period. Water health is another key one, particularly as they're operating care homes and sort of medical environments as well, where the risk of Legionella is present, so there's a number of safeguards in place in terms of water temperature. So they wanted to monitor that, moving away from just a monthly site visit to test the water to something that's continuously monitoring and proactively alerting for any issues to do with water health. And thirdly, emergency lighting. Statutory requirement is to test the emergency lighting fixtures on a monthly basis and a duration test on the battery on an annual basis. And that again requires site visits. So they were looking at ways to automate that process and receive that test result data centrally without having to visit every site. So the challenges they were facing really, and this is the same for any enterprise that's looking to deploy IoT at scale. When you're deploying thousands of devices, that requires a lot of people. So the first issue they had was around just the distribution of people. A lot of different people are going in and out of properties already. How could they schedule, organise visits, do the installation, and make sure that the installers had the right equipment with them, that they were being effective and installing first time. As soon as you have to go back for a second site visit, you've more than doubled your costs straight away. So it's much simpler to get it right first time. They didn't want huge staff training. They didn't have to train everybody on IoT and IT solutions and LPWAN. They wanted something that was relatively straightforward to have these individuals go and install and manage devices. They've also got complex connectivity requirements, very widely dispersed. So in some situations, LoRaWAN made a lot of sense. In other places, maybe NB-IoT or Sigfox. Again, that becomes more complex because there's different variants of devices that they're deploying. They needed to make sure, particularly from a compliance point of view, that that device was where they expected it to be and that the measurements that it was delivering could be trusted. So part of that is making sure that traceability record is there and that that information is correct, and that they understand the metadata. So if a water temperature sensor is attached to a pipe, making sure we understand whether that pipe should be hot, cold, or whatever. And also making sure that those devices are securely enrolled in bulk, so they haven't got issues of having to email around device credentials and so on. Each device also needs some kind of associated configuration. How often should it measure? How often should it communicate? How should it be configured locally? Maintaining that configuration is a challenge at scale. They didn't want to have to pre-configure everything in a central depot before shipping out. They wanted the flexibility to do that remotely. And then finally, managing those devices in life, making sure they continue to communicate, understanding where the stock of devices are, understanding how that relates to the network subscription, monitoring in life to make sure they were continuing to communicate. When the batteries were going low, they needed to understand that. So those were all of the aspects that they needed to consider, and they wanted a common model to do that across all use cases, all types of devices. So from the very start of the project, BCHA looked to develop a common operating model for their IoT rollout. Whatever the use case, making sure that everything was managed through the life cycle in the same way. So the first part was around selection of equipment. The rollout began around the time of the first COVID lockdowns and supply chain shortages. So they didn't want to lock themselves into one particular type of hardware. They wanted the flexibility to mix and match temperature, humidity sensors, for example, from different vendors and across different network technologies. So really no vertical stack solutions where there was a different management interface and a different deployment model for a particular device vendor. On the design phase, they already have a strong asset record in terms of where all their properties are, what types of buildings they are, where devices should potentially be deployed. So they needed to use that. They didn't want to create something new to manage those assets on top of that geography. From a deployment perspective, BCHA already has people visiting properties regularly, whether that's building surveyors or gas engineers, electricians, maintenance, a number of different disciplines already in those properties. What they wanted to do was arm those with the capability to install and manage devices and carry out service repairs on those devices. So they needed a very intuitive way for that to happen, using essentially a mobile app. And then from the build point of view of the application, BCHA was very clear early on. This wasn't just about presenting data, this is about creating actions, business processes. So integrating to their housing management system, integrating to their CRM, so that when an issue occurs, for example, with low temperature and high humidity, that tenant or that resident is engaged, understands what changes they can be making to improve their own health and well-being and to protect that property. And that was absolutely critical to really see the value out of the project. One of the most important parts of any IoT project is the installation process. BCHA used the Daizy mobile app to make that as efficient and simple for its staff as possible. The app allows you to scan the barcode of a device, so you're not having to pre-assign any stock. It makes sure that the device is in the correct place, so from a device traceability point of view, we know the device is being installed where it should be. It handles the device configuration, so as part of the activation process, it's enrolling that device in the LoRa network server, or it's activating the SIM, or however it's communicating, but it's also ensuring that a downlink goes to that device to configure it in the correct way. And that's giving the feedback to the user that they know it's working, so when they leave site, they know that device is operational, removing the need for those return visits. Once that device is deployed, using the tools within Daizy to monitor that device, ensure it continues to communicate, and if it doesn't, to be able to create tasks or service repair tickets for somebody to go and fix. So whether that's going to replace a battery or to fix a gateway, or all of those tasks are managed within within the platform to ensure that they're continuing to get the value out of those devices. So the outcomes for BCHA in their first year, they deployed those 3 use cases, built triggers to automate processes both on tenant engagement but also on asset management. And they saw a reduction in site visits and staff travel for things like compliance. One of the important factors that they identified was that there was no impact on their corporate IT. Nothing's connected to the corporate LAN. It didn't create new security headaches around new equipment and new attack vectors. This thing is completely overlaid on their existing estate without the need for any of their corporate IT services. So they're already seeing savings in year 1 based on the operational expenditure around compliance reporting, and that means they're now looking at further use cases around things like fire safety, fire doors, fire alarm panels, and also using some of the existing devices for new use cases. If you're monitoring temperature and humidity, you can start to do more kind of social care type projects on using the same data. So really expanding where they started and looking further out. BCHA used the Daizy platform for the full life cycle for their project, everything from selecting the right devices, managing and planning the design and installation, the actual deployment process, the in-life monitoring, and the publishing of data to their applications. For anybody that wants to try Daizy, if you've purchased the Things Conference hardware kit, that actually includes 6 months free access to the Daizy platform. Come and see us on stand B10 to find out more information about that, or visit us at daizy.io. We'll be happy to give you more information around how we're enhancing and improving IoT operations for enterprise customers. Thanks very much for your time.